You can't try to think about what your long-term future is going to look like because you have no idea what the future is going to look like. You just show up
Yeah.
every day, and one day leads into the next day, and one opportunity leads to the next opportunity. And as you grow and evolve, your dreams grow and evolve. So you can't sit brand new in sobriety and try to figure out what your life is going to look like at 1 year or 3 years or 5 years, because you're going to be a whole different person.
You know, that's so true.
I dreamt that you were twisted through seven.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Soberful podcast. And I am delighted that finally we have Angela Pugh. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes, ma'am, you did it.
Joining us today. Angela is you may have heard her from the Addiction Unlimited podcast. She is been working in addiction recovery as an interventionist and trainer, and now as a master's life coach. Telling her story and changing lives as she goes about it. Now, okay, let's start here. After bartending her way across Hollywood and Beverly Hills, tell me about that.
Oh, wow. What a life. Yeah, that was my 20s. So I lived full-time in Los Angeles all my 20s. And then I was still pretty much 50-50 LA, Kansas City for another, I don't even know how many, 15 years probably, till COVID. And yeah, I mean, I was a bartender. It was incredible. You know, it was such a beautiful life, no responsibility. I made a ton of money. And I really just, partying was just my lifestyle. It's all I did, you know. I didn't have the inconvenience of having to have a regular job and like get up and go to work like other people did. So yeah, drinking was kind of my full-time job.
How was so the hospitality industry has, you know, people always tell me my industry has a lot of drink. All of the industries do, but hospitality in particular, bartending in particular, were all bartenders? I mean, like you finish at 2 or 4, like how are you drinking while you're working? How's that work?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, it's fascinating. You know, now I get up in the morning at the same time I used to get home from work. You know, like it's crazy how life changes. But yeah, I mean, you're definitely usually drinking while you work, certainly toward the end of your shift. I mean, most of my life, I didn't go to work till like 11 p.m., you know?
Wow.
So yeah, it was just a very different life. Those were some of the more difficult transitions for me when I got sober because I I was so used to nightclub life. Like that's all I had ever done. And it was really hard for me to break away from that. I didn't care about not drinking anymore, but just the lifestyle and being up at night and not so active during the day, you know, those little things were much more difficult transitions for me than not drinking.
So why did you get sober? What happened?
Well, I would say for me, really, you know, we talk about rock bottom. My rock bottom is not a moment, right? I feel like rock bottom is a period of time leading up to quitting drinking. And I definitely had a significant moment that was, you know, the final straw, so to speak. But my rock bottom really was 2 to 3 years at the end of my drinking where it had just escalated to a point that it got really dark. And I think everybody can relate to that, where you can look at your drinking and like in the beginning, it was so much fun, you know, and then there's a little middle part where it starts to get a little bit messy and you start thinking like, ooh, I wonder if this is really a problem. And then there's the next stage that's like, oh God, this is really a problem, you know, but by then you're trapped in it and overwhelmed and you don't know how to get out. So I lived in that space for a good 2 to 3 years and really was just incredibly sad. And I hated myself and I hated my life and who I had become. And I was a liar and I really was so isolated. You know, like I had friends and I went out and I did things, and for all intents and purposes, it looked like I had this incredible life. I had money and cars and all the things, right? Like you would really think I had figured out the key to life. But internally, I was just a disaster. And none of the people I spent my time with really knew anything about me, right? Like all of our connections were around drinking. Nobody knew how I felt about anything in life or how much I was struggling with my self-esteem and just being disgusted with myself for my behavior. Nobody knew that I was a liar, right? That I was lying and manipulating and doing all these things. So it's really very isolating. So at some point in that journey, my final straw was I was driving on the freeway, 70 miles an hour. wasted, and I hit another car at 70 miles an hour. And
Whoa.
I thought I killed the guy that I hit. I thought I killed him, because you can't imagine hitting somebody at 70 miles an hour and not killing them, right? That was the very moment. There were a few things that kind of clicked as I was standing on the side of the freeway and like just looking at the wreckage that was so symbolic of my life, right? Like the wreckage of the cars, the lights of the ambulance and the police cars, and it was just chaos. And that's exactly a perfect symbol of my life. You know, it was just chaos and overwhelm and confusion. And there were so many things I thought. The first thing was, I never cared if I hurt myself because I hated me. I wanted to die every day. I prayed to not wake up. So I didn't care about me, but it never crossed my mind that I could hurt somebody else, that I could take out an innocent person. And I know that sounds crazy, drinking and driving, like, because that's what people think, but I had been drinking and driving for over a decade and never even crashed into anything at all, right? Like I didn't bump into a car or hit a curb. Like I had never had any of those issues. So that wasn't a realistic thought for me. So the understanding I could hurt somebody else was really like deal breaker. We're out on this, The other thing was thinking about like calling my mom and having to tell her I killed somebody, which is heart-wrenching. And I have one of those moms that's like the best mom on the planet and just is such an honest human being and has so much integrity and certainly instilled all of those things in me. And to think about making that phone call to her and just like destroying her life in one sentence was horrific. It was horrific to think about it. And the last thing was, and listen, I'm telling this story like it's long. I mean, all of this was probably a matter of seconds, this stuff flashing through my head. But the last thing was, I felt like it was a really good indicator that I had a bigger purpose, because I was trying my best to die every single day. And this was for me, probably, I think, like the third situation that I was walking away from that I probably shouldn't have been walking away from. Like I should have been much more injured. And I thought, as hard as I am trying to die, like the universe is just not letting me die. So like there must be something else I'm supposed to be doing, And those were really the thoughts that were cultivating, that I was like, okay, like I just have to finally stop screwing around and thinking about someday I have to get my life together, and I've got to figure out how to just get my life together.
So what did you do to get sober?
I went to AA.
And how was that?
Oh God, the most magical experience. It was wonderful, but AA is really, it's up to you what your experience is going to be. AA doesn't do anything, right? It's just a room you go sit in. It doesn't perform for you. It's not there to be the way you want it to be. It's inanimate, right? So what you take from those rooms is fully dependent on where your head is. And I was definitely a little bit weird about the God stuff because I am not a God person. So I had those thoughts. But then I reminded myself, I was like, Angela, you're a freaking adult. Like nobody can force you to believe something you don't want to believe. Like grow up. You're fine. Nobody's going to force you to go to church. You're grown. And that was really the extent of that conversation with myself. And I just went. It was absolutely incredible. I felt like for the first time ever, I actually fit in somewhere. And I had never had that experience before.
I felt exactly the same.
Yeah.
That was life-changing for me.
Yes, it was life-changing. I was like, these are my people. Like for real, these are my people. And as it went around the room, the very first meeting I went to was kind of everyone's worst fear of what AA is going to be. Like it was all men, like everybody was 60, 70 years old. It was a beginner's meeting, oddly enough, because there was not a single person in the room that was a beginner except me. Yeah, it was crazy. And it was definitely nerve-wracking. But as it went around the table, I heard this one guy introduce himself and he goes, "I'm just going to listen today." And I was like, oh, yes, that's what I'm going to say. And when it came, and that's what I said now for 18 years. That is my standard line. Hey, everybody, I'm Angela. I'm an alcoholic. I'm just going to listen today. But, as everybody shared, the next morning I went to another meeting and that ended up being my home group. It's still my home group to this day, 18 years later. And everybody that shared as it went around that room, every single person said something that I could relate to.
Huh.
And I felt so shocked by that because we were all so different.
Yes.
We had different lifestyles and different backgrounds, and we were different ages, and there's boys and there's girls. And, most people are married. Most people aren't like me. Like I'm committed to being a forever bachelor, and most people aren't like that. But despite all those differences, every single person said something that I was like, oh my gosh, me too. Like, yes, I have done that. Yes, I said that once, and I just felt so connected from the first moment and so grateful to be there and also grateful to not have to figure it out on my own. Like all I had to do was show up and shut up. And that was perfect for me because that's what I needed in that moment.
And so this is in Los Angeles, right? Which is like ground zero for 12-step programs. I mean, you have like whole smorgasbord there.
Yes, for sure. And I actually got sober in Kansas City. I moved back to Kansas City when I was 30. I got sober at 33.
Okay.
And that move really was a huge catalyst. Like I said, the last 2 to 3 years of my drinking were really dark and depressing. And that move to Kansas City from LA was a big piece of that. It was a very difficult transition that I did not do well.
Wow. That's quite a contrast, LA to Kansas.
Yeah. Well, Kansas City. You really can't say Kansas because we are actually, Kansas City is a real city. The rest of the state is basically a farm. So those are Kansas and Kansas City are two very, very different things.
I have really fond memories of Kansas City because my husband lived there when I first met him. So I went there twice. And Kansas City is a great city. It has fabulous barbecue.
Yes.
And in October, they do, all these charities do haunted houses that are incredible. I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah.
So I really like Kansas City too. There.
It's a great, great city. It's very laid back, which I definitely needed, getting sober, being out of the rat race of LA. But listen, I love LA. That's why it's still my second home because I love the energy of that city too. And those are kind of my two sides. Perfect. I come to Kansas City and chill, and then I go to LA and see all my people out there and get energized and, in entrepreneurship and drive and ambition. And I love both equally.
So you've been sober for 18 years?
Sober 18 years. Yeah.
Wow. What are some of the lessons you've learned along the way?
Oh my gosh. How could you even boil that down into one podcast? I think the greatest lesson for me in the whole journey has been about personal responsibility, right? Not blaming my life on other people because I was really good at playing that victim role. I came from a messy childhood and a drug addicted parent and all the chaos that comes with that stuff, and definitely have, enough trauma for 2 or 3 people. And I always thought everything happened to me. And it was a really beautiful thing to learn that I played a role, not in my childhood trauma, obviously, but in my adulthood and in my drinking and a lot of things that happened in the chaos of my life as an adult. I played a role in that. That was a result of my choices. And I know a lot of people don't like that because they don't want to take responsibility. But for me, it was really empowering because then I understood also if I made different choices that my life could be super powerful and really fantastic. And I have that control to make my life really great, where I always felt like for a long time, I felt like I was cursed or something. And like all this bad stuff just happened to me. But it really is because I made crappy choices.
I love that, Angela. I that's what sobriety taught me as well. And it's quite scary because you get to a point where you realize I am completely responsible for the experience I want to have here.
Yeah,
and I didn't want that. I wanted someone else to be in charge, to be someone else's fault.
And see, I'm the opposite. I'm a control freak. Like I want to be in charge of my ship. I don't want anybody interfering with it. Like I trust me. I know that I will figure it out. And
I'm the same. What I mean was like completely responsible for the experience I wanted to have. It's like, if this isn't working, you need to change. You need to
Right,
do something
right,
different. It's not that person's fault, or the
right,
economy or this or that. It's like,
right.
you need to make this work. And
Yeah,
that's what I mean. It's
yeah,
like, it's very, we get stuck in our stories a lot,
yeah.
are stuck in our stories of why things don't work out, why things are the way they are. And it's quite terrifying to realize that you're responsible for the experience that you want to have in this
Mm-hmm.
world. And that doesn't mean we can control events. It means that we
Right.
get to choose our response to
That's
events,
right. That's right.
right?
And we get to choose what we engage with, right? Like
Mm,
I would engage in relationships or jobs or crappy choices, blowing my money on a new handbag instead of rent, right? Like I would engage in situations and behaviors and relationships that were just so destructive and chaotic that we're just going to create more chaos. And it was really cool to understand, like, I don't have to do all that stuff just because I used to do it, right? That's my old story. Just like you're saying, we get caught up in those stories. But that old story, even if I just did that yesterday, that doesn't have to be my story today. And from this point forward, we can change
mm.
that at any moment.
It can. And that's where freedom lies. That's true
Hmm.
freedom,
Yeah,
right? That's how we get free. We don't think it at the time, but that's how we get free.
for sure. I remember my sponsor saying to me one time, he called it, and I was telling him I was bored, right? I was like, I'm so freaking bored. I was probably 3 or 4 months sober, which is its own little tricky spot.
Yeah.
And he's like, Angela, boredom is a choice. He goes, if you're bored, you're being boring. He goes, it's not that there aren't things to do. You're choosing not to go do them. And I was like, oh my gosh, you know?
Oh my God.
I was like, I never would have thought of that, but he's right. Like I am, like literally there are millions of things that you can go do and they don't have to cost money. Like it is a choice. Like boredom is a choice.
That you put that so well. And that is definitely one of the things that happens in early sobriety. I remember that. I'm like it just felt like oceans of time. Like, because
Yes.
my
Yes.
drinking was a full-time job on top of a full-time job. Like, I'm like, geez, all this time, what does everyone do with it? And it was perplexing. I mean, now I can't even
Mm-hmm.
remember the last time I was bored.
Yeah.
But that's such a good way of putting it. There is so much to do, so
So
much
much
to
to do.
do.
Yeah. Yeah, but
And
you
and
have to
what
be willing, right? So there's another beautiful lesson of sobriety for me was that willingness and understanding like you have to be willing to do it even when you don't want to. I had to be willing to show up to a meeting every day because it was the right thing for me to do and it kept me well. It didn't matter if I felt like it or if I was tired or if I'd rather
Mm,
do 75 other things. I have to be willing to do the right things because they're the right things regardless of how I feel. I have to be willing to try something new
mm,
or something different when it doesn't seem like it would work for me or
mm,
when I think I don't need to do that, right? Like I didn't get a sponsor for 10 months because all my ego stuff, right? I'm very strong willed, I'm very alpha. And I was like, I don't need a sponsor. Like I knew eventually I would get one. But it just wasn't in my early sobriety. I'm feral. I'm not domesticated. It just wouldn't have worked out. And I had to be willing at some point to try it, whether it sounded like I needed it or not, because I knew I couldn't trust my thinking, right? So at some point I understood if my brain is telling me not to do it, that's a really great indicator I probably need to do it immediately.
yeah, that's a good point. Okay, so you get sober in Kansas. You've moved back there. Your life changes. So what are you doing? How did you get into being like working in addiction and all of that kind of stuff? And tell us about that.
So I knew really early on, I knew at like 4 months sober that I wanted my whole life to revolve around recovery. I had no idea what that was going to look like. I just knew. And probably, part of my addiction and compulsion, right? Like for me, I needed my recovery to be as significant in my life as my drinking was. And that means
Hmm.
it was going to be full time because my drinking was full time. I've never been so committed to anything. So my recovery needed to be the same way. Excuse me. So I think when I was about 2 years sober, the first thing I did is got certified as a life coach, right? I'm doing AA and I'm helping people through sponsorship and all of that. And that was, kind of dipping my toe in. I got certified, my first life coach certification when I was about 2 years sober. And then I was sitting at my house one night and this television show came on, Intervention. And it was the first time I had seen it. And I literally like almost fell off the edge of my couch, like inching closer to the television. I was enthralled and I was like, that is what I want to do. So that was my first step into working in the field. And everything became about being an interventionist. Like, what do I have to do? What training do I need? Who do I call? Is there a certification? Like, what do I need? And I spent a good couple of years really training. And I was doing some interventions. There are some sort of classroom trainings that you can take with certain people and do all of that. I became a part of a professional interventionist organization and started going to the conferences and meeting the other interventionists. And then I started following people. Like I was literally just randomly calling interventionists from a list and going, hey, if I pay my own travel, can I shadow you on your next intervention? And most people hung up on me, but I did find a few people that were willing to let me do it. And that's what I did because I wanted to be really good at it, right? I didn't want to be winging it and just like when you're telling families you're going to help them and serve them, to me, it's very important that I do that to the best of my ability and that I know what I'm doing when I'm doing it. So the education and training part was extraordinarily important to me. And I spent a long time and a lot of money making sure I understood and I was really good. So that was the first thing. And then from there, my coaching practice kind of grew from interventions because I'm helping these families and flying their person to treatment. And then I continue working with the family while the person is in treatment. And then when the person gets out of treatment, I would continue working with them to reintegrate back into, going to meetings, back into life and that sort of stuff. And a lot of times that meant flying back to wherever they were, wherever their home state was, and maybe staying for a week or 2 weeks. Or some of my clients, like I would fly back once a month and be there for a few days, and that's really how it started. And from there, it just grew. Then I went to, I did addiction counseling school. I did social work school because again, that knowledge piece is extraordinarily important to me. I want to be the best at what I do, especially in something like this that is so freaking important. And it's so impactful on people's lives. I just want to do the best job I can.
And then when did you start your podcast?
My podcast was 2018. So I own men's sober living houses, and I started that in 2017. I think I opened my first house, and then the podcast was 2018.
Wow. So you just own the men's sober living houses. You don't run them. Wow.
Oh no, I run them.
Oh, you run them. Oh my
Oh,
goodness. Oh my
yeah.
God. How do you get time to do all of this?
This is why I get up at 4:30 in the morning.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
But no, yeah, I run them. I love them. And it was just another one of those things that I knew I had a very specific culture I wanted to create. There was this gap in the market in Kansas City that we didn't have really good, nice, stable, clean, sober living. And through my intervention work, right? Like I'm doing interventions in Kansas City too. And people are going, hey, he's coming out of treatment and needs sober living, but we don't like the options we're seeing. And after having that conversation 30 times, in a couple of years, I was like, wow, you know what? I want to open something that is exactly that, nice, clean, safe. And I'm very hands-on. I'm at my houses all the time. I have great relationships with my guys. They have access to me. I help them whatever they need, right? I've got guys that I work with them to rebuild their credit, help them get jobs, like whatever they need, I'm there.
God, that's amazing. I had no idea you did that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? I'm the same. It's like I didn't just get sober. It gave me my whole life and career. I was born to do this. I love working with people and helping them get sober and seeing the journeys and seeing people celebrate, the milestones. It's just such I would call it a second chance life, right? Like I should not have this life.
Yeah.
And there's just no way with what I was doing to my body and my mind that I could have had this life.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you feel the same.
Yeah. I didn't even have plans for my life because I didn't think I would be alive. I didn't even expect to live to 40. So I never thought about my future or what I might do or what that might look like. I had no idea. I just thought I would be dead.
God.
I know, right? Like it's so weird to think about it now, but I think that was another beautiful thing for me with AA is I really did feel like when I walked in those rooms, I felt like I had found my purpose. Like I felt like I understood what I was put on this planet for, and it was sobriety and well, really recovery, because those two things are different too. But it gave me my whole life. And it allowed me also hearing all those people share in those rooms every day. It's like my life started to make more sense. I started to understand myself, learning from other people who were just like me. And it's like, wow, my whole life, I thought I was just effed up and defective. And now I understand I'm fantastic and really funny and really smart. And I just have this thing that I have to treat on a regular basis to keep it manageable, you know?
What's the plans for the future? What do you see yourself doing in the next 5 years, 10 years?
Oh, that's such a hard question. I'm such an entrepreneur. Like I like everything. I do have a restaurant on my plan, on my 5-year plan. So I'll probably do a
Does it include a
restaurant.
sober bar?
I mean, we will definitely have a fantastic mocktail selection.
Is this in Kansas City?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Can I come?
Yeah, of course. I'll throw a big sober party when it's ready. But yeah, I definitely want to do a restaurant. I have a couple of franchises that I kind of want to do because I think that would be fun. I'm also a trader, investments and stuff. I love trading, stock market and things like that. So I hope to get to put a little more time into that at some point. And I host sober travel, and that's a super important thing to me because I did it my first year sober. I went on a sober cruise and it was life changing. So to be able to offer that to people, and especially like making it family friendly and spouse friendly, you know what I mean? Like your spouse doesn't have to be sober to come. We're going to Italy in October. So I definitely want to continue doing that, and maybe some retreats, start doing some retreats in the States, you know. I don't know, whatever. I want to do everything.
Same. I know, it's just having enough hours in the day to do it all.
Yes.
So yeah. Can you? What do you think you're 19 years ago? What do you think that girl would say to this girl? Like, what do you think she would believe this? I mean, I know you said you thought you'd be dead, but what do you think she would think about where you are?
I have no idea. Like, I would never even have thought any of this was possible. I mean, first of all, everything that I do now, and you'll be able to relate to this for sure, everything that we do now didn't exist then.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's
It was,
true, that's
so there's
true,
no
yeah.
way to even fathom. And that's what I
That's
try to
so
tell
true.
my clients and my guys
Yeah.
at sober houses too. It's like, you guys, you can't try to think about what your long-term future is going to look like because you have no idea what the future is going to look like. You just show up
Yeah.
every day, and one day leads into the next day, and one opportunity leads to the next opportunity. And as you grow and evolve, your dreams grow and evolve. So you can't sit brand new in sobriety and try to figure out what your life is going to look like at 1 year or 3 years or 5 years, because you're going to be a whole different person.
You know, that's so true. My husband works in academia, or he used to. And when he would go and speak in high schools, he would say, you're all going to have jobs that haven't been invented yet.
Yeah.
So it's not that you're going to be a doctor, a lawyer, a dentist. It's like, well, some of you might be, but probably not now without AI. But you're going to have jobs that we haven't invented those jobs yet. Nobody knows what they are or what
There's
they're called.
no way to think of it. Yeah.
And you're going to do those jobs. And that's it is. You're so right. You're so true. Angela, it's been so great to have you on here. You're a dynamo. Wow. You're just one of those people that it's like, I'm so glad you're sober because you're such a blessing to the recovery world. And I've met people like you. This is what I mean. Like when we stop drinking, underneath we're extraordinary.
Extraordinary. Yes. That's why my podcast is Addiction Unlimited, because we are unlimited. When you really, we have this illness that is so manageable and so treatable, and it doesn't have to cost anything, and that is such a blessing in itself. But our possibilities for life are unlimited. Once we kind of rein it in and figure out how to do it, it's like, I have no limitations.
Yeah, I love it. That's the message. I love it. There are no limits. In sobriety. That is the message. Angela, tell people where they can find you.
You can find me on all the socials at Addiction Unlimited, almost all of them. I'm old, so I don't do TikTok or Snapchat. but Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, LinkedIn, at Addiction Unlimited everywhere, and addictionunlimited.com.
Brilliant. And we will put those in our show notes and link to Angela on social media if you want to know more. But thank you so much for being a guest. I'm really glad that we got to do this eventually.
Thank you. It's been fantastic getting to know you. Thank you for having me on.